So 14 more Russian ships were just hit last night, which makes 90 in the past 6 days. This is becoming a real problem for Russia and the Russian war effort, which led one Russian reporter to say, quote, "The picture is bleak. Logistics are under constant pressure. Infrastructure is being hit and supply routes are becoming more complicated." He went on to explain how if this continues, and it looks like it will, the Russian front lines will face a systematic supply shortage. So last night, the Ukrainian unmanned systems forces released again more footage showing strikes on Russian shipping in the Sea of Azov. They say they hit 10 tankers in the Sea of Azov, as well as 4 ferries. They say between July 6th and July 13th, units of the unmanned systems forces have struck 90 vessels of Russia's Shadow Fleet. Now, I saw some comments in yesterday's video asking about, or a couple days ago, asking about the damage to these ships. How many have been sunk? How many are totally out of commission? We don't know. All right, so we've got the footage of the drones impacting some of these ships, some burning in the distance, and Russia actually released some footage, or guys on these ships, showing the damage to a couple of the vessels. Definitely going to take some time to repair. It's going to be out of commission for a period of time. I don't think any have been sunk yet, for what it's worth, but I also don't think I've seen any claims that any have been sunk. That's one piece of it. And no doubt, Ukraine would like it if every one of these ships was at the bottom of the sea and could never be used by Russia again. But there's a secondary effect in play right now that is effectively, from what we can tell, bringing shipping in the Sea of Azov close to zero. So Russian media Rybar put out this graphic earlier today referring to the Sea of Azov shooting range. They say, quote, "According to some media platforms, passage through the Azov-Don Canal has already been suspended. Following this, freight costs and insurance premiums are rising. Delivery times are increasing, and the number of those willing to work on dangerous routes is shrinking. This is particularly acute for Crimea, whose supply depends heavily on maritime transport." It's worth pulling up a map here real quick to talk about the issues facing Crimea and how Ukraine is making this worse and worse. Unsustainable for Russia is the best way to put it. So we got deep state map here. Crimean Peninsula, of course, at baseline, Peninsula is already a little bit difficult to keep resupplied, and Crimea is facing a significant fuel shortage right now. There's really 3 key ways into Crimea, into or out of Crimea. You've got the northern approaches that is broken down to an eastern and a western approach, already under Ukrainian drone fire. More details on that here in a second. To the south, you've got the Kerch Strait Bridge, which has limited traffic due to past Ukrainian strikes. Then you've got the Sea of Azov, this body of water here to the northeast of Crimea. Technically air travel, but really air resupply is only bringing in troops and limited amounts of equipment. It is not even in the conversation when it comes to keeping the peninsula fully supplied with things like food, fuel, and ammunition. So Sea of Azov is another big one here. And in the past week, Ukraine has just been hammering any Russian ships trying to make this trip. In fact, Military Informant, a Russian mill blogger, shared a couple different graphics showing just how traffic across the Sea of Azov has effectively completely fallen off in the past few days. He said on June 30th, there was satellite imagery showing 90 ships in the Sea of Azov that increased to 90 the following day. On July 6th, as a result of Ukrainian drone strikes, that's the day it started, the number of ships fell from 98 to 42. So more than 50% reduction in the first day. But those strikes continued day after day after day. So on July 8th, only 28 ships were observed. And then they noticed on July 11th, so yesterday, 3 ships visible making this transit. That is very close to a 100% reduction in the Sea of Azov being used to resupply Russian units, and really not just in Crimea, but this is also one of the routes they supply into Crimea and push north into Zaporizhia and Kherson. That is an area of the front that is going to be under incredible strain in a very short period of time. And a Russian mill blogger officer at the front talks about this, saying, quote, "The enemy is hitting logistics more frequently and more accurately. The first week of July already exceeded the June figures in terms of the average daily number of strikes. The situation in the southern direction is particularly alarming. Chaplinka, Chongar, and Henishek." In fact, let's go back to the map here. He's talking about the northern approaches into Crimea and how these have already come under significant strain due to Ukrainian drone strikes. So the 3 areas he calls out here, Chaplinka, this is the western approach. In fact, Brennan Kelly, a couple days ago in the conversation talking about Kherson, mentioned how this is kind of becoming a bottleneck in Russian logistics, and Ukrainian drones are wreaking havoc in this area. So again, verified by a Russian reporter, Chaplinka under issue. He also talks about Chongar, which is this area here. The one of the few overland crossings, bridges here have been under increased Ukrainian drone attacks, and we're seeing buildups there as Russian forces try to get through, and then Henishek here a little bit to the northeast. So from the Russians, these key areas crossing into the north of Crimea are becoming more and more of an issue. He said damaged bridges and crossings force us to reroute supplies, which means longer routes, more fuel, increased wear and tear on vehicles, delays, stress, and disrupted schedules. At the front, delays in supply quickly lead to problems with ammunition, repairs, evacuation, and troop rotation. It's up in the air how much of this we are seeing right now, but what I'm hearing more and more from different Russian analysts and mill bloggers is this cannot keep moving in this direction because the trend is bad. And the longer this goes on, the more acute the supply disruptions, the logistics disruptions, offensive operations at the front will be affected. And it's not just the logistics at this point. Of course, we've seen the trucks getting hit all across Crimea and the southern occupied territory, some of that creeping into other areas of Russia. We have refineries getting hit, another one hit last night deep inside of Russian territory. Also, Ukraine is carrying out what the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Magyar, is referring to the Crimean switch-off. They're going after energy infrastructure. They say, quote, a total of 60 energy nodes have been hit since July 1st. A deep and total blackout is inevitable. They say just last night alone, 5 substations and a thermal plant were hit in Crimea, as well as 4 substations in Donetsk and Luhansk. And we have the footage showing these strikes. What it actually leads to is a little bit up in the air, but we know that this is very fragile infrastructure and generally underprotected infrastructure. When you look at the issues that Ukraine dealt with as Russia targeted their energy substations over the course of the last few winters, it doesn't take a lot to bring these down for a period of time. Crimea is facing that right now with daily power outages, and every one of these strikes that gets through makes it worse. It's more to repair. It makes it more untenable for the Russian military to really operate anywhere in the southern directions. This is brought up again by Russian mill blogger Officer at the Front, who says, quote, strikes on power substations and infrastructure in the south and in Crimea are another alarming sign. When the energy and transportation infrastructure begins to fail, the front lines will feel the consequences, not immediately, but inevitably. The picture is bleak. The Air Force is wearing out. There are fewer trained personnel. Logistics are under constant pressure. Rear discipline is lacking in some areas. Infrastructure is being hit, and supply routes are becoming more complicated. Each individual incident can still be explained by chance, but together they show a trend, and that trend is bad. He says the enemy's pressure on our operational capabilities is increasing. If nothing changes in the coming weeks, logistical losses will begin to affect the combat effectiveness of frontline units, not just in isolated cases, but systematically. I mean, you are seeing the Russians kind of come to terms right now with what this middle and deep strike campaign is meant to do. Ukraine hitting logistical infrastructure, hitting refineries is not just meant to be a headache. It has a direct, or maybe we should say indirect, impact on the Russian war effort. As it becomes harder to get fuel, less fuel is available, then it is harder to get it to forward locations, makes it harder to get to the troops. That alone, when a frontline unit has 10%, 20%, 80% less fuel available than they did last month, operations change drastically. You all of a sudden have to start prioritizing, medevacs, troop rotations, getting ammunition to the front. You can't do everything all at once. We are seeing that play out right now. More and more Russians coming to terms with exactly how difficult of a situation this is becoming, and it is not stopping anytime soon. Just last night, the First Corps of the National Guard, Azov, released their own footage talking about we'll call it a middle strike campaign, because it was about 100 kilometers striking a critical area right along the old Ukraine-Russia border. So some of the territory that Russia first took back in 2014, where they say, quote, after conducting thorough reconnaissance, they used precise strikes with Hornet drones to hit a secret base in, I'm going to butcher this one, we'll say Ambrelivska, again, eastern Donetsk. Tanks and infrastructure at the base were damaged, and the railway line was blocked. The damage to the storage facility has made life difficult for the occupiers, but most importantly, they are forced to abandon the base and move logistics from the occupied territories into Russia. And they must always look up at the sky. In Ukraine, there will be no safe place for the enemy. Every one of these matters. And we're starting to see it from more and more Ukrainian units, so much so that Ukrainian President Zelensky just yesterday announced the standing up of a new long-range strike command to further degrade Russia's warfighting capability. And something to keep in mind here is what we have seen to date is pretty pieced together, right? I mean, you've got units that are carrying out strikes everywhere from the zero line, like right at the front, all the way to 300 kilometers inside of Russian-occupied territory. Some of those same units carrying out strikes inside of Russia itself. It's working. It's pretty effective. But what Zelensky is doing is he identified the effectiveness of those campaigns and says, we're going to put together a unified command to make them even more effective going forward. Again, from the Russians' perspective themselves, if this continues, it is going to become a major issue, not just on holding Crimea or holding some of the occupied territories, but along the front line. And should this continue at this current pace, we should expect to see those issues start to come to light in the very near future. Now, quick fundraiser update. We are rocking along with Car for Ukraine. This is a year-long campaign. We are now at 90,000 euros raised of a 97,000 euro goal for our summer campaign. In fact, we just saw a confirmation earlier today that the newest truck, the 20th truck in this campaign, was delivered to the 225th Separate Assault Regiment. Now, we got to wait for that footage to get kind of cleaned up and the background blurred before we can share that. But this is the unit we talked about a couple days ago in a video where Russia had claimed that they had taken territory in the Huliopoli direction down in Zaporizhia. And the 225th said, what are you talking about? They immediately rolled up an assault unit, captured the couple Russians that carried out that flag planting operation, and kind of laughed and said, this is very clearly not Russian territory. Anyways, that regiment, one of the groups that we're supporting in this campaign, they just got their new truck yesterday, thanks to your generosity. Now, if interested in learning more about that campaign, you can find that link in the pinned comment and description below. But that's all we got for now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see y'all next time.